Hey, it's Kim Howerton. Welcome to the channel. Glad to have you here with me. I'm going to try to make this succinct, but that is not my strong point, and it's sort of a long and rambling story, so stick with me. But I want to talk about the fact that along my journey, I started as sort of a traditional keto approach, which was very high fat, moderate protein, very low carb. And I have, at this time, almost 6 years later, transitioned to what I would call more, I guess, better defined as a high protein, low carb diet. And why have I made that transition? Well, let me tell you a little bit of the story, and hopefully that'll be helpful for you. When I found keto, I was in a pit of despair. Movie references, put them in the comments if you know what I'm talking. So I felt like I was really confronting mortality is what I'll say. Like, I felt like I was aware that my life was going to be pretty crappy and not as long as I wanted it to be from that point forward. And I was in a pretty bad spiral with my weight. I was gaining weight rapidly. My relationship with food was crap. I had a pretty out of control eating disorder. It was just all pretty bad. And I found keto, and it was like this lifeline because I didn't think it was going to work. It started to work. I felt different. I felt good. I felt capable. I had agency. And I was sold, and I was in. And I went hardcore, and I was deep in. And my initial starting macros, for reference, were around 65 grams of protein, around 150, 175 grams of fat. Then sometimes it was a little lower, but I'd say 150 on average is probably about right. And then 20 grams or less of carbs. And after a little, several months of that, and what I'm just calling out there is my protein was so low. I'm basically 5'9". I mean, if I stand up straight, I'm 5'9". It's my story. I'm sticking to it. And I was not eating a sufficient amount of protein. But everyone at the time, so the problem with keto now is everyone has their version of keto, and there are all these different versions, and you don't know which one to listen to. It's very confusing. Problem then is there was like one version, and it was low protein. So there was one version I knew about. There were some other people in the background, but I thought they were wrong. So I don't know. Anyway, so it was low protein, and I very quickly was like, oh, that's too low. So I raised it up to about 88, 90 grams, but it was still fairly low, but not super low. And things were going swimmingly for a couple of, year and a half. I was losing weight. I was happy. I felt in control of my food. I had an ability to self-regulate how much I ate, which I was not constantly going through drive-thrus. I didn't have a single experience. I don't like the word cheat, but didn't have an experience that anyone could call a cheat for that whole time. I was devoted and dedicated. And then my weight loss just sort of stalled, and I wasn't seeing the progress I wanted, and I felt very betrayed by my keto experience because it had promised me that this was going to work, and now it was not working, and I had goals that I wanted to accomplish, and I was not happy. And so I went on a excursion, a 2-year period where I tried all sorts of things. I looked at, do I have food intolerances? I looked at, how's my sleep? I looked at, lots of things. My hormones, my blood panels. I learned a lot about a lot of things, but I didn't seem to lose any weight. And ultimately, I decided that I needed to do a reverse diet. So I talked to my friend Robert Sykes, Keto Savage, and we talked about reverse dieting, and it seemed like a good idea. Now, I think 2 things were important to this. First, I was not eating a ton. You expect if someone's not seeing weight loss that they're eating way, way overeating. And I was not way, way overeating. I had gotten a little hopeless about the whole thing. But, I also just know from some metabolic testing I've had, at least at the time, I had a very low metabolic rate. So low, in fact, that the woman came in and told me that I had the second lowest metabolic rate she'd ever tested. I really wish she had not told me that. And actually, I have since decided never to get my metabolic rate tested again. It was, in fact, so depressing to me. I can figure out what my metabolic rate is based on how my body responds to the way that I'm eating. And that, for me, is a better idea than the testing based on how it affected my psyche. Just for me. So I did this reverse diet. And like I said, a couple of good things came out of it. One, I decided to take a year and to take the pressure off myself for that whole year and say, I'm not going to try to lose weight for a year. I'm going to try to maintain my weight for a year. I'm going to focus on living a good life, doing good things, and eating more in a controlled and gradual manner. Stayed keto, stayed conscious, stayed tracking, did all those things, but wasn't trying to lose weight. And I have to say, it was kind of a new experience for me. Because to put yourself through a period of time where you have to tell those thoughts to shut it, like the thoughts in your head, we should be losing weight. You should be thinner. You are not as thin as you want to be. What are you doing taking your eye off the ball? And I just had to keep telling that voice to shut up. And so at the end of the year, give or take a month, I think it might have been 11. No, yeah, at the end of the year, it was actually 13 months. I was like, I think I'm ready. I feel ready. I feel different. And I decide over that refeeding period, I had been raising my protein. So I was eating more fat. I mean, I was eating a good amount of fat. I wasn't low fat in any way. I was not trying to lose weight, right? I was eating a fair amount of fat, but I had been raising my protein through that year. So I had started that period of time, my protein was around 90 grams, give or take. By the end of that period, it was closer to 150 grams. So I'd gone from 65 to 90 to now 150. So that's a big change in terms of the amount of protein I ate. And the eating higher and higher and higher protein filled me with nothing but delight. I loved it. So I was like, this is a win. So when I decided to lose body fat at that point, it was clear to me that I wanted to stay with a really nicely elevated amount of protein. And so I took on an approach that resembles sort of Ted Naiman's PE diet, which is protein to energy, with protein being sort of a primary central macronutrient, and then fat and carbs being sort of the thing you flex more based on your weight loss goals. And I decided to eat more vegetables and that sort of thing. So not starchy things, not sugary things. I was still kind of in that keto framework, but, more vegetables than I had been eating in my earlier keto experience. And that was what worked for me. And those 35 pounds, the next 35 pounds I lost came off fairly well. I did it in 2 stints because when I took on that idea around doing a reverse diet, I started to periodize my nutrition, which means I did periods of time where I did fat loss and periods of time where I did maintenance. And so I lost about 20 pounds, did some maintenance, about 15 pounds. And so over the next year, I lost that 35. And it felt amazing. I was thrilled at the progress. I felt good. I felt in control. It worked. And here's the deal. I want to be really upfront about this. At this time, I live a very high protein, low carb lifestyle, and I am in ketosis, though my ketones are pretty low, but I always seem to register ketones. But a lot of people would argue I'm not on a ketogenic diet anymore. My ketones are under 0.5, but they're never under 0.1. And to that, I would respond that I don't care. I care about the outcome. I care how I feel, how I function, how I work in the world, how my body works, what kind of energy I have, how my brain is working. I don't care what you call me. I care how I feel and function. Well, I mean, I don't want you to call me anything mean, but you know what I mean. So, Anyway, I digress. Have you seen that? There's a meme that's like, I don't give an F about what you think of me. And it's like, but my anxiety does. Anyway, it's just me. Is that just me? Okay. So, I felt like I should be really explicit about this because some of you might be confused. I did a social media post recently and I was like, oh, I talk about this all the time, so it should be really clear. And then it became clear that people don't know what I'm talking about. So I, at this time, eat high protein, low carb. I don't keep my carbs under 20 anymore. I can go as high as like 70 grams of carbs a day and still register ketones. So I don't go as high as that every day or all the time, but I don't really worry about whole food, vegetable, and even some fruit in my diet anymore. I enjoy including those kinds of things, and I keep my fat very present. I don't go low fat. I don't eat a low fat diet, but it's not a high fat diet anymore. And this way just works for me. I recently started back I say back like I was ever there before. It's been so long, it's a different life. I started up in the gym, so I've been regularly working out. It's been going great for me. I'm happy. I still have health and fat loss goals, and I feel kind of good about it all. This is just life now. But I thought I should talk about this topic specifically because some of you might feel confused and some of you might have questions about what does, so my macros these days, just for reference, because I gave my early ones, it depends if I'm in a weight loss, fat loss phase or a maintenance phase, but my protein is always around 150. My carbs are somewhere between 30 and 70, depending on the day. I'd say they probably average around 50. And my fat will vary the most. My fat will vary depending on what phase I'm in. And if I give you I don't want you to think this is the number that's going to fix it for me, because they're very unique to me. You know, my fat might go as low as 50 grams and as high as 100 grams, just depending on what I'm looking to do in my phasing. And I don't really want to go back to high-fat keto. Do I still love a good ribeye? Absolutely. Do I still want a dessert now and again that has a lot of heavy whipping cream on it? Yes, I do. But sort of my day-to-day, day in and day out, I miss the protein a lot more than I miss the fat when I've tried to kind of switch back. And the thing that I want to point out, though, is there are a lot of people out there teaching about keto and low carb who, when they find something that works for them, abandon all other ships, right? So there are a lot of people who I tend to look at, and this might be my history. So when I was sort of higher fat keto, I remember being friends with a lot of high fat keto people, and we would regularly feel very attacked by the low fat keto people or the lower fat keto people. And there was a bit of an antagonistic relationship between these different camps. And I just want to say that I still support high fat keto. I think high fat keto is the thing that got me through the door, got me into this world, got me into this body I'm in now. I would either be, if I really stop and think about it, I have a strong suspicion I would not be alive if I didn't do high fat keto when I started. Why? I probably would have stepped in front of a bus, to be perfectly honest. And the thing that enabled me to make the switch was within that way of eating. If you had told me to eat the way I eat now, then I wouldn't have stuck to it. The high fat was really helpful for my brain, for my hormones. I got to indulge in some really amazing food, and it changed the trajectory of my life. So I don't want to ever be one of those keto teachers that doesn't acknowledge that high fat has a place. And I see some keto teachers when people are a week into keto saying, no, your macros, they're wrong. Your fat is too high. There's a meme that's like, if your body is high fat, your diet doesn't need to be. And now, in the frame of mind I'm in now, I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. When I was starting keto, I felt attacked by that statement. And we can argue all we want that maybe I needed to toughen up, but like, F you, I'm just going to be honest that like, it's tough out there. It's tough living in a very large body in a society that doesn't really prize large bodies. Every day is hard. And when we're chronically carrying around this awful burden, just be nice. Please, just be nice. And know that for some of us who are really stressed out, even if you didn't mean it, that's how it came across. And how it came across matters. And so, if I were prescribing the way I think people should go about their business here, I would say when you first start keto, I would not restrict your fat. I would eat plenty of fat. I would enjoy your food. I would focus on restricting the carbs. See if this works for you. Go on an investigation. Don't worry too much about some of the details because they'll work themselves out. But then over time, if you hit a stall, then I would try lower fat. See if it works for you. I will tell you, I know people like Siobhan Huggins who does something Keto AF. Keto AF. Which is, I think it's Amber O'Hearn who actually came up with the term. AF as in animal foods, a little play on words. And it's high fat carnivore, basically. And it's more like 2-to-1 fat to protein. Whereas like the way I eat now is more flipped on its head, or even 3-to-1. And for some people who really struggle to have satiety and lose weight and feel good, for some of them, this approach, it's very unique, works great, where high protein, lower fat hasn't really worked for them. I'll also say that about 2 years into my keto journey, I did try more the PE approach that works great for me now. And at that time, I didn't see weight loss and I got very, very depressed. I suffer from depression. I have my entire life, and my keto diet had moderated my emotional state very much. I was able to manage my mood on keto in a way I'd never been able to before. And when I tried the PE approach then, although at that time the PE book wasn't out, it was like 3-to-1, 3 protein, 1-to-1 fat. I felt awful mentally. But now that's how I eat. So the other thing I want to point out is there's a time and a place for things. You need to do what works for you now. You need to give yourself some grace. This is not a race. You need to see what works for your brain, what works for your mood, what works for your clarity of thought, what works for your body, what works for your hormones, all of it. But at this time, I've transitioned to so how do I manage my weight and health now? Focus on calories. I do. I don't worry about carbs that much, but I still keep my carbs fairly low because I get more bang for my nutritional buck sticking to things like broccoli over things like rice. Whereas I can get a lot of broccoli for the budget that I, could get a teeny bit of rice. I do think there is some importance to avoiding certain types of foods for some of us. Like, I don't think I do all that well on grains for the most part. And so I tend to avoid them. So how I eat now works for me now. And I love that. And I'm a conscious, involved creator of my diet, right? I get to be in charge of what I choose to eat based on the feedback I get. And if at some point this approach stops working for me, I now feel empowered to find the next approach that works for me. Not jumping ship to ship to ship, but just making slight tweaks. Because the thing that I learned on my keto, low carb, health journey is ultimately my goal is not to be keto or to be low carb or to be anything. It's to be healthy. And so I just keep on that journey and stick with that commitment. So I guess I wanted to just clarify that. Hopefully this helps clarify some of that. I have looked at this with my clients. I work on this with my clients. I will say for those people that hit a plateau, the majority of them seem to do better going high protein, low carb. But there is a minority, but an existing one. They're not a myth. They are real people who do better higher fat, and other things need to be adjusted. So just because your keto guru tells you that it has to be XYZ. So on all of these nutritional studies, I read nutritional studies every week, right? I research this, I look at that, I read this study. The thing you have to always remember is the conclusions of a study are always about the average, and there are always outliers. And so I can tell you the majority of people doing X will get Y, but there are some people that do not, which means, yes, pay attention to what works for most people and then test it to make sure it works for you. Because ultimately, I don't think you're concerned about living the average way, but instead living the way that works for you. So if you're interested in going higher protein, low carb, more moderated fat than you've been doing, I'm happy to talk more about it, give more rules, details, that sort of thing. That's the way that I myself live these days, and I'm happy as a clam. Where's that expression come from anyway? How do you know how happy a clam is? And I still support people if it's the right choice for them, being high fat, not low protein. I draw lines where I'm like, that is unsafe. You need to stop doing that. I have a mug. I'll be right back. Look. Read that. It says, I'm not bossy. I just know what you should be doing. My mother gave this for me Christmas. What do you think that means? She gave this to all the women in my family. She did not give it to the men in my family. I'll let you read into that what you will. So I'm going to talk more about this, is what I decided. I'm going to talk more about the variability in the way we eat. I'm going to give more personal examples. I will give you more examples of the way that I eat now, because I think for a lot of people that follow me, they might be people that started keto, it was working great, and it stopped working so great, and now they're like, now what? But I never want to villainize where we came from, because that first part of my journey, like, I hold in my heart as a really important part of my journey. Just because I'm somewhere else now, I don't look back at that and say, well, that was a total mistake. I do think it was a mistake that I didn't realize sooner that we change over time and you just got to go with it. But I think all of us have stayed in a relationship just a little too long at one point or another, so we can forgive ourselves for that and enjoy what we have for us coming in the future. So hopefully that explained a little bit about where I've been, what I think about the topic, why I totally support a variety of ways of eating, and at the same time, I'm really looking forward to what the future brings. So thanks for listening. All right, if you have questions, if you have topics you want me to talk about, if you want me to go into detail about some things, just put them in the comments and I will do my best to do another video and chat about these topics, and see you soon. All right, bye guys.